In the last video, you learned about for loops. The syntax of a for loop is for, then the first parameter is initialization, then condition, then iteration. We took several examples, trying to print 0 to 10, trying to print the even numbers from 0 to 10, counting down from 10 to 0, trying to print out a word on different lines, and trying to print out a word backwards. We also tried going through the sum of numbers. So with this, we're able to count the sum of numbers from 1 to 10. And then when you finish the for loop, you can then print out sum of numbers from 1 to 10 is this. So the reason we're printing after is because if you want to only print out the sum after you finish counting, then you need to put it outside the for loop. If you put this in the for loop, if you put this here, it's going to print this out 10 times. Then we also treated nested for loops. So in this tutorial, we're going to talk about arrays. I'm going to create a new class for that. New class. Just call this array example. Array examples. Check the main method and click finish. So arrays are a collection of variables containing values of the same type. It's used to store multiple values in a single variable. You don't have to create multiple variables. Arrays allow easy manipulation and arrangement of data. So to create an array, you need to specify the type of the array, like the element's data type. You can also use a square bracket for a single dimensional array and 2 square brackets for a multi-dimensional array, and you also need the number of elements. So this is the syntax for an array, data type, the square bracket for a one-dimensional array, and the name of the array. This is how to declare the syntax to declare an array. To initialize an array, you can use name of the array is equals to new, the data type, number of elements. So remember, when you're declaring, you can also initialize directly. After this, you can directly put this equals to this. So now let's try initializing an array with 7 elements. So if this array is going to store 7 numbers, it means the data type will be int. And if it's a single dimensional array, that's 1 row and 7 locations, you use the square brackets, the open square brackets, and the close square brackets. The name of the array, we can call this first array. Well, let me say my first array equals to new, the data type int, and then the number of elements 7. Remember I said it will store 7 numbers this way. So now you can initialize an array. To initialize an array, you just need to call the name of the array and the location. So just like strings, arrays also start from location 0. So you put this, the name of the array, in square bracket the location, and you put what you want to store. So let's store 10 in the first location. In the second location, we can also store a number. So the second location will be at location 1 and then 12. So first location in the array, index 0, you use 0, second 1, and so on. So the second location, you can put 13, So the last location for this array is going to be location 6. Because we start counting from 0, it means we'll only have 7 locations here. So 0, the first one, the second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7. There's also another way we can initialize an array directly while declaring. So we can put int my array2 equals to, and in curly brackets we can directly put what we want to store. So 10, for example, 12, 13, 12, 22, 32, 52. So we can also initialize an array this way, declare and initialize directly this way. So for multi-dimensional array, now you have rows and columns. To do that, you need to put the data type, but this time around you need 2 square brackets. Then we can call this first multi-array equals to new int the number of rows and the number of columns. So this array has will have 4 elements, 2 rows, 2 columns. So now, when initializing an array for a multi-dimensional one, you put first multi, the name of the array, the location. So it's going to start at 0 from the row and 0 at the column. You can initialize this to what you want. You can also have, so this row is row 0, column 1 next. So this is like the top left location. This 0, 0, top left location. This one will be the top right location. Then for the bottom left location, so remember it's this 0, 0, row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1. So check how rows and columns look. Row 1, column 0, so this will be at the bottom left. And row 1, column 1, this will be at the bottom right. So this one is in the first row, this one is in the second row. So in the first row, we have 2 columns, column 0 and column 1. In this other row here, we also have 2 columns, column 0, column 1. So if I would have put 2 by 3, 2 rows, 2 columns, it means I'll have 0, 2. So in the first row, I have 3 columns. Also note how it doesn't pass the number here. Can you see? When we have 2 by 3, we want 2 rows only and 3 columns. So we need another column. There you go. So the first row, remember we're using 0, has 3 columns. The first column, the second one, and the third one. And the second row also has 3 columns. The first here, the second, the third. So we can also print values in an array. We can do this, system.out.println. Let's say we want to print out this location. So remember, so far we have stored all this in locations. So you can use the system.out.print method to try and print a location. So you just have to call the location you want to print. So this way, so let's run this. 10. That's because my first array 0 has the value 10. Let's try to print my first array 4. There you go, it has the value 22. So now we can use a for loop to try to print out all the elements in an array. Remember your for loop example. Remember the syntax for. The first thing is initialization. And put this in a comment. Initialization, then the condition, then iteration. So let's use the for loop to try and go through the array to print out values. So remember the for loop, the loops can be used to iterate through something. So for int I equals to 0. So the reason we are starting at 0 is because we want to print from 0 to 6. So we need to start at 0. So now for the condition, where do we want to stop? So we're starting from 0 and we want to make sure our values are 0 to 6. We don't want it to pass 6. We don't want it to go to 7, 8, 9 and so on. So we need to make sure I should be less than equals to 6 or less than 7. And how do we want to move by? So here if you look at it, we're moving from 0, 1, 2. We're moving by increments of 1. So you can put I plus plus or I equals I plus 1 this way. So now in this for loop, let's try to print out our locations. So remember previously when we were printing out, we called the name of the array and the location we wanted to print out. So let's do that. But if we put 0 here, it's just going to print out 10 6 times. So we're using I to help us go from 0 to 6. So when I is 0, we will have the value 10. Then remember the next iteration, I will be 1, then I will be 2 and so on. So you just need to change I here. So while you go through the for loop, it's going to get the name of the array and the location I is at. So let's try this. There you go. So 10, 12, 13, and so on. So we use the for loop to help us go from a starting point to an ending point. So we know the starting point is 0, array start from 0, and we know our array ends at 6. So instead of using I less than equals to 6, you can also use I less than 7. Remember that's the same thing since you're increasing by a step of 1. You can also have my first array dot length. So if we call the name of the array and dot length, it's going to give you the number of elements you have. So sometimes if you're using a method, which we'll come to in a future class, you may not know the length of the array that's being passed. So you might just decide to do my first array dot length, so it can work for any array. So this dot length gets you the number of elements you have. And unlike the string, we don't have the parameters. We do not have this. So this will give you an error. So if you have the length like this, that's for a string. For an array, you just need the length without those circle brackets, the parentheses. So we can also add the number 10 to each element in an array with a for loop. So you know how a for loop works. As we go from 0, which is the starting point of the array, to less than 7. Remember my first array dot length. Instead of just printing what we have in the array, you want to add 10 to each location. Remember how to initialize an array. We're just going to call the name of the array and the location we want. So the name of the array and the location we want. Remember, we're using I to help us go from 0 to 7. So in the first one here will be replaced with 0, then it will be changed to 1, then 2, and so on. So my first array I equals to my first. So we want this my first array I to be initialized to whatever we currently have in my first array and then add 10 to it. So we will also want to get what we have in my first array currently. And remember, to do that, we just call this the name of the array and the location we want. So we want to add 10 to what we have in this array. So 10 plus what we currently have will be the new location. So if we have, let's say we have 10 here. So when I is 0, is going to be my first array 0, which is 10 plus 10. So now my first array 0 is going to be 20. Next I is going to be 1. So it's going to be my first array 1, which is 12 plus 10, 22. So my first array 1 is going to be 22. Then next I is going to be 2. That's 13 here, right? So it's going to be 13, my first array 2, that is, plus 10. So my first array 2 will be 23. And so on until 6, because we specified I should be less than my first array dot length, so I should be less than 7. We can also try printing elements of this multidimensional array, this 2 by 3 array. To do that, we can use a for loop. So remember how we had nested for loops? When you're trying to go through a multidimensional array, you can have nested for loops. So remember, for int I equals to 0, I should be less than the value here, the first value here, 2 I plus plus. So you can start with the row first. So first we want to go through the row, and the rows are 0, right? And they are less than 2, 1. So it only goes from 0 to 1. So I should be less than 2 and still incrementing by 1. So in our inner for loop for ints, this time j, remember you can't use I anymore. For int j equals to 0, j should be less than, this time around, it should be less than 3 j plus plus. So this is because, remember, we are starting from 0 from the columns, and the column part should also be less than 3, because we are going from just 0, 1, and 2. So now to try and print this, we're going to use system.out.println. Remember how to print with an array. So my first array, so instead of 0, 0, my first multi-array, not my first array. So instead of 0, 0, printing my first multi-array 0, 0, before you print this for loop, I'm going to show you what my first array 0, 0 prints. I'm just going to comment this and comment this as well. So let me run this. So system.out.println, my first array 0, 0, which is 1. My first array 0, 2. Let me try that. It's given 5. We initialize my first array 0, 2 to 5. My first array 1, 2 is going to give us 6 because we initialize it to 6. So now, using a for loop, instead of just printing the arrays directly, we're going to use a for loop to try and help us go through this array to print out each location. If we use 0, 0, it's just going to print out 0, 0 6 times, 2 times 3. So now, as we're going from the row, can you monitor how this is? We want I here and j here. So in the first one, remember how for loop works, I will be 0, and j will be 0. So it's just like writing first multi-array 0, 0. In the next iteration, I is still 0, but j is going to be 1. So it's like writing 0, 1. Remember, after you make I 0, everything here has to run. So when I is 0, j will have to be 0, 1, 2. Before it finishes with this, then comes back out, then I will change to 1, and j will be 0, 1, 2. So in this system, the out of print line, first multi-array 0, 0, because at first I will be 0, j will be 0. Then fourth multi-array 0, 1. Remember, I is still 0, j has to change to 1 because it's still in the inner loop. Then first multi-array 0, 2 will print out. So now when it finishes this, when it reaches its limits, remember it can't go to 3, so that means this has finished and it's going to come back out to change I to 1. So when I is 1, j is 0, the first one will be 0 because this will start afresh again for I. So when I is 1, j will be 0, so here we'll have 1, 0. Then I is still 1, j has to finish, so j will be 1 next, 1, 1. Then I is still 1, because j has to finish, so j will be 2, so that is 1, 2. Let's print this. So 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, 6. So the first one, 0, 0, will print, and first multi-array 0, 0 is 1. Then the next one, 0, 1, 2. The next one, 0, 2, 5. The next one, we'll finish with this 4, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2. So that is how a multi-dimensional array works. We can also try to print out the sum of the numbers in a multi-dimensional array. Remember our sum example? I'm just going to edit this one. When we wanted to print the sum, if we want to print the sum of numbers stored in a box, you'll first have to store your initial value of sum, right? So in sum will be 0. Before you start counting, your sum is 0. You can then use this for loop to go through the whole numbers in the box. So it has rows and columns, right? But instead of printing this time around, we want to add it to the sum. And remember how sum works? The new value of sum should be our old value of sum plus what we have written here. And there's also a short form of writing this. So anytime you have something like sum, I'm putting in the comments, sum equals to sum plus 1. You can also write it as sum plus equals to 1. This way. It's the same thing. So I can shorten this now and have sum plus equals to 1. So remember your semicolon as well. So you start as sum 0, and as you go through each row and column, you want to increase the value of sum by whatever is in that particular location. Let's try another example and get the elements that start with an F. To do this, let's use a new array. So let's call this array element and let it store words. So we can have string. Remember the syntax of an array, data type. So initialize an array data type, the name of the array equals to new data type, and the number of elements. So now let's create an array with 5 elements that stores words. So an array that stores 5 words. So we have string. Let's just call this array words equals to a words array equals to new, the data type again, which is string. Remember, if it stores words or sentences, just text strings, you know it's going to be string. So number array, let's say 5, we're storing 5 text strings. So we have this. We can also initialize. Remember how to initialize? You use the name of the array, the location. Remember, we always start from 0, and you can name this what you want. So let me name this first. You can have another one. I'll name this second. And the next one, let's put third. And also, can you see how we were using quotes, double quotes? That's because we're storing strings. Another one to store the fourth location in the array. Remember, the fourth location will be at index 3 because we're starting from 0. And then the last location is going to be location 4. Remember, we just have 5 elements, and since we're starting at 0, the last location will be at index 4. This way. So now, let's say we want to print out all the elements in this array that starts with an F. First, in a real life example, if they tell you to go through a box that starts with, to find a letter in a box that starts, a word in a box that starts with an F, you have to go through the whole box, right? And remember, we can use a for loop to help us go through the box. So with our for loop, you can have what? 0, because that's our starting point. So int I equals to 0. And we would like to end at, I should end at 4, right? So I should be less than equals to 4 or less than 5. We can also have I less than, remember the name of the array, dot length, and we want to just increase by 1. So this for loop can help us go from 0 to 4. So that's what this for loop is doing. It's just going from 0 to 4. So now, while we're going from 0 to 4, we would like to know whether the word at a particular location has a value, and if it has the first letter starting from a value. And if you want to check something, remember you can use the if statement. So if, to check something, anytime you want to check something, you need an if. So in a real life example, if someone tells you to go through this and give you the word that starts with an F, the words that starts with an F, you're going to check that that particular word starts with an F before giving them up, in our case, printing it. So we need an if to do that. So if the particular word, this particular element, while we're going from 0 to 4, and that is what? The name of the array and I. So if this array at this location, remember we're using this for loop to go from 0 to 4. So this this particular one is going to go from what's array 0, what's array 1, what's array 2, what's array 3, what's array 4. So if what's array I, remember you have dot starts with. Remember that method dot starts with that can help you check if something starts with a particular letter. So if words starts with F, or you can use the char at 0 equals F, your choice. So if this particular element starts with an F, we want to print out the particular word. So to get the particular word, remember you just need to call the name of the array and that location. Starts with an F. So remember the reason why you're still using words array I, remember we're still in our loop. So when I is 0, we're going to check if words 0, which is first, starts with an F. And if it does, we want to print out words array 0, which is first, starts with an F. Then the next part, I is going to be 1, is going to check if words array 1, which is second, does starts with an F. So you know the word second does not start with an F, so this is going to fail, and that means what is printed inside here, the statement inside here will not be executed. So this will be ignored and is going to go to the next line after, and since we have nothing after, it's going to come back out to when I is 2. The same thing for third. Third does not start with an F, so it's going to ignore this, come back out, nothing here, come back here. So for words array 3, that's because I will now be 3. So if words array 3, which is fourth, that starts with F, is going to print out this. And you know words array 3 starts with an F, so system out the print ln. Words array 3, fourth, starts with an F. Then it's going to finish this. If there's something here, this will also print out depending on what you put here, the statement. The next one, fourth, I will now be 4. If words array 4 does start with F, so it will check if fifth does start with F. If it does, system the out of println and fifth starts with an F. Then when you finish it, it's going to stop because remember we specified that I should be less than 5. So we're not going to have I equals to 5. So that is it for our for loop example. In the next tutorial, we're going to try to solve various array questions and answers. Thank you.